For our Gateway 101 presentation with the Raymond School District. We have all the school districts who are part of this evening, and we have a great lineup of speakers who are with us this evening. I'm going to be going over some data from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey that's been taken here in Raymond High School for several years now. And our first guest will be Laurie Warnock. She's going to be talking about vaping. And following that will be Kate Frey, which is a different person who's on the agenda. Kate's with New Futures, and she's going to be giving us an update on marijuana of today. And then we're going to talk about the resources that are available here in the community of Raymond. So with that, we'll get started. We want to give an overview of where the coalition started. We've been around since 2002, promoting positive, healthy choices in the community for youth. And as part of that, we've been collecting the Youth Risk Behavior Survey here in Raymond at Raymond High School. This result, the information you see on your screen here shows from 2007 in the blue category, in the blue column, to 2015 in the red column. So when the coalition first started doing this work, our main priorities were cigarettes, alcohol, and marijuana. You can see that in the blue how those were our highest rates of use. In 2000, we moved forward to 2015, and e-cigarettes and vaping, prescription drug misuse, and heroin popped up as things that we needed to address in 2015. So that was the target of much of our work the past 2 years. We also did alcohol and marijuana prevention as well. But you can see, I can tell you that the youth action students at both the middle school and the high school identified vaping as an issue that they wanted to focus on with their peers. And we had a slight decrease of 1%, but this is on par with the New Hampshire Youth Risk Behavior Survey results. We also did a lot of work around prescription drug awareness and heroin here in our community, and you can see that drastically fell. Still concerning, still alarming these rates, but still work that we've been working on. While we were focusing on those issues, alcohol turned into a much higher risk than we expected. It increased 50% from where it was in 2015, from 24% of youth reporting use in the past 30 days to 38%. In 2017. The results for the New Hampshire Youth Risk Behavior Survey are in, and the state average is 30%. So Raymond is above that. That's why we identified this evening's presentation as a concern and something that we wanted to provide information in the community. Right along with alcohol, marijuana took a very drastic increase as well, 50% again. The New Hampshire State Youth Risk Behavior Survey average is 23% of youth reporting, so Raymond at 37 is definitely an issue that we want to raise in the community and get people talking about this. And you can see alcohol and marijuana pretty consistently. We did a great job from 2007 when we focused on that. We brought it way down to in 2015 to 24%. We did a lot of work in that area, and then in 2017, it, along with marijuana, popped right up. I just want to focus back on that. Something that's very concerning, and our youth action members actually have been talking about it recently too. They want to raise awareness to the fact that youth are driving under the influence of marijuana and thinking that there's nothing wrong with that. That's very concerning. 11% of students report driving in a car with somebody who has used alcohol, while 28% of students have driven in a car with somebody who has used marijuana, and those are Raymond statistics. We need to educate them that driving impaired is driving impaired no matter what the subject is. And then our next highest rate of use was vaping and e-cigarettes. At Raymond High School in 2015 to 2017, obviously I had mentioned that it's 24%. That is right in line with the state average. And at the middle school, again, the kids have identified that there. That took a decrease there. The kids in youth action, as well as the health teacher, Ms. Kubler, has done an excellent job of providing information to the students. But prevention takes all of us working together, and we know that if we decrease access to substances and increase awareness, we can decrease use. And that really takes all of us working together. We want to remind everybody that the legal drinking age is 21 years old. Our youth have done sticker shock campaigns raising awareness to this. And the social host law for homeowners and parents are responsible if they provide alcohol to anyone under the age of 21. That's very important to know, especially with prom and graduation season coming up. When we talk about is it wrong or very wrong, you can see the perception of wrongness from 2007 was 53% of students thought that it was wrong or very wrong to use marijuana. And now that took a drastic decrease in 2017 to only 23% of students feel that way. Students who think it would be easy or very easy to get these substances, in 2017, the youth here reported 61% think it would be easy or very easy to get alcohol, 59% for marijuana, and 56% for a vaping product to vape, which is kind of concerning, where alcohol and marijuana is easier for them to get than a vaping product. Prevention starts with a conversation. We want to encourage all adults, parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles to have a conversation with the young people who are in their life. 39% of students reported talking to somebody about drugs and alcohol. That's a pretty low number when you consider how high the use rate was and how easy it is for them to get these. And it takes a village. The coalition, again, has been around since 2002. All of these partners listed on this map are healthcare partners, parents, youth, schools, substance misuse professionals. They are all part of the coalition and contribute to the work that we do, all for the young people that are in this community. So it really takes all of us working together to attack this issue. So with that information that I've just unloaded on you, I'm going to introduce Laurie Warnock of New Hampshire Poison Control.
We just put a midterm. Perfect timing, except with waitress skills, right?
Sorry about that.
The minute you have something in your mouth, they ask and they get you anything.
And she has computer skills too, that's always a bonus.
How's that? Oh,
Perfect.
That's my size, good.
Thank you. And just
Great.
hit the button right there.
So as Celeste mentioned, I'm Laurie Warnock. I'm the Education Coordinator for the Northern New England Poison Center. I am known in New Hampshire as the face of poison, and I have to do the hand gesture, it's required. I'm the only employee of the Poison Center here in New Hampshire. It's actually located at Maine Medical Center in Portland, covers Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. The bottom of almost every slide you'll see nnepc.org, that's our website, and 1-800-222-1222, which is the Poison Center's number. 24/7, 365 days a year, free, confidential, great source for just questions. I have used it personally. Has anyone else ever used had to call the Poison Center? Thank you. Small child or pet? Small child. 3-year-old boys are like my favorites because, bless their hearts. I've actually had to call it for my husband, he keeps the dog's phenobarbital for seizures on the windowsill in the kitchen, and his own glipizide blood sugar medicine also on the windowsill in the kitchen. They both get a pill at night and in the morning. They should not get the same pill, however, at night and in the morning. So one day he tells me, I think I took the dog's pill. So disguising my voice, I call my employer and say, hi, it's Laurie. Yes, I know. My husband took the dog's phenobarbital pill. Is this a problem? Well, what's his weight? Guess his weight. I don't know. Is his nose cold and wet? Ha ha ha, very funny. You know, they have a great sense of humor. They're trapped in a windowless room. So it was not a problem. Except 2 weeks later, he accidentally gave the dog the glipizide pill. Now, we also take pet calls. It's sort of a starting point. If we can't answer the question, we'll refer you to ASPCA, who will ask you for a credit card number before they give you important advice, but that's what keeps their doors open. And so my boss did tell me this is concerning because the problem could be the dog's blood sugar could drop precipitously and then she would go into insulin shock. And so I should call ASPCA because no way to really monitor that, really. Could I take the dog's blood sugar? Well, we don't have a starting point, so we don't know. So I called ASPCA, and they could not help me either. So I spent the rest of the night giving the dog a handful of Frosted Flakes every hour on the hour to keep her blood sugar up. She was quite happy with the whole thing. But now the medications are kept at separate ends of the house because we engineered safety into that. So there are plenty of good reasons to call the Poison Center. I'm going to talk to you about electronic cigarettes, electronic nicotine delivery devices, ENDDs. Vaping is the other term for it because what we're doing is vaporizing either a liquid solution or vapors from heated materials if we're talking about marijuana and inhaling those vapors. So it's known as vaping. Once upon a time, there were cigarettes. And we knew about cigarettes, right? They were sexy. All the cool kids smoked them. They could be either relaxing. Oh, at the end of the day, I just need a cigarette. Or first thing in the morning, I can't get out of bed without my first cigarette. We knew that because there were movie stars that smoked cigarettes. John Wayne, ever so macho, Steve McQueen. Lauren Bacall used to talk about what a dramatic moment it was for her. Snap open her cigarette case, pull out a cigarette, tap it, hold it to her lips, and wait for him to light it. He would light it, she'd take a long drag, and then blow it out in his face. And she'd say it was a whole scene setter. It set the mood. I mean, you know, early audiences would be clutching their pearls, good Lord, they're having sex. It was that kind of moment. And that was the image that we knew, but what we didn't know was what the cigarette companies knew. And this is some of the other advertising strategies, of course, the Marlboro man, right? Big rugged guy, the camel guy. 3 of the models that posed as Marlboro men died of lung cancer. Not really that surprising. And because it was the era, we had to have a lady cigarette as well, right? You've come a long way, baby. Virginia Slim's ad. And then the pretty cigarettes. Smoke Pretty Eve. But if you go even further back, and kids that I show this ad to are usually amazed, because who would ever think you would say things like, before you scold me, Mommy, maybe you'd better light up a Marlboro. We don't even see these kinds of ads for the most part. First of all, because kids aren't reading magazines, and because we've limited where these print ads happen. You never need feel over-smoked. That's the miracle of Marlboro. I don't even know what over-smoked means, but in any case, this was the advertising. But we learned eventually what the cigarette companies already knew, that cigarette smoking was deadly, that it was a contributor to a whole host of diseases, a cause of many of those diseases, and because of one particular ingredient, nicotine, it was an addictive procedure, an addictive process. So as public health started started fighting the trend of smoking, fighting the media campaigns, right? Some of you have probably seen ads with Terry. Both those top pictures are Terry. That picture was taken shortly before she died. And we've seen this sort of backlash from the public health community in demonstrating the evils, the harms of cigarette smoking. And it worked. For a long period of time, we saw traditional cigarette smoking decrease. The green line is adults. The blue line is students. This is 1965 to 2014. And I'm not sure what the blip in the blue is. Could be just a data point, data collection zip or something. But in either case, we've seen the actual usage of traditional smoking decrease, which is great. Even when we look at youth tobacco use, so this is from the National Youth Tobacco Survey, all of these blue elements are traditional products. Cigarettes, cigars, smokeless, even hookah pipes, which are basically water pipes where you would you would inhale vapors of a sweetened tobacco product. But here's e-cigarette. You can see it was originally introduced around 2010, started to pick up around 2013. Now this is 2015 to 2016. But if what we're seeing in New Hampshire indicates anything, that line should be going up. Because I have been doing these presentations sometimes 2 and 3 times a week in southern New Hampshire alone at school districts, because it has exploded over the past year for them. And we know this in New Hampshire. So if we look at youth e-cigarette use tripling, there's that huge curve. This is from the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. When we look at e-cigarette use nationally, about 11%. In New Hampshire, 25% of the students are demonstrating use of e-cigarettes. So it's a legitimate concern. It's a legitimate percentage of students that we're concerned about. And of course, we have a whole new set of role models, right? I mean, if Johnny Depp is doing it, it's got to be the coolest thing since ever. Jenny McCarthy, Leo DiCaprio, all shown in social media vaping, all shown at awards ceremonies vaping. And it's touted as a healthy alternative to smoking. What do we know about e-cigarettes? Well, they're unregulated for the most part by agencies like the Food and Drug Administration, because they're not considered a drug. and the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency because they're not considered a tobacco product. They're somewhere in between. The only rules we have really seen so far focus on child-resistant packaging of the little liquid nicotine juice bottles because they were little stoppered bottles with a sweet-smelling solution in them and varying levels of nicotine, which can be absorbed right through the skin, so if little kids got into it, it could be very toxic and, in fact, fatal. The e-cigarette companies have been targeting children. I mean, if you look on social media, the number of ads on social media where our kids are and we necessarily are not necessarily in the same space, lots of ads for e-cigarettes. The flavors are all sweet candy flavors, which make it seem innocuous. And many vapors actually do endorsements. If you go online, you'll see kids, we go into YouTube, and you'll see kids doing smoke tricks, lots of fancy smoke. There's actually competitions on how many bubbles and how many clouds and heart shapes and whatever that you can do. And the kids will often, this is a video of some Canadian boys, they're hotboxing. They're in a closed vehicle, and they're doing what they can to fill the entire thing with vapor. Now, they'll hold their device, kind of like the makeup videos. I'm using a number 7 eye crayon. You know, they'll hold the device up. They'll tell you what brand of vape they're using, of e-cigarette device they're using, what flavor they're using, and they'll try to fill the car with vapor. They'll share it, too. You want to try mine, which is a wonderful thing during flu season. Some people won't vape in their cars because it leaves a film on the inside of the windshield and on the dashboard. Somehow they're not making that connection that if it's leaving a film on the inside of the windshield and the dashboard, it's also leaving residue in your lungs, but that's beside the point. So if you happen to have a chance to cruise around YouTube, take a spin and look up smoke, look up vape. It's an interesting social experiment. Make sure you clear your browser history afterwards. But it's eye-opening. And the media strategies really haven't changed all that much. This is a traditional cigarette ad, and here's Blue. Stephen Dorff, action hero, is a spokesman for Blue e-cigarettes. He's also an emphysema patient, which I think is interesting. Jenny McCarthy is actually a Blue spokesperson. We don't even pretend anymore that this is a cessation device, right? Nobody likes a quitter. Why quit? Switch to Blue. And I heart you, please vape. Again, that selling of it as a healthy strategy, a healthier choice. And for adults who are already smokers, it may be a healthier choice. We don't really know yet. Certainly it has none of the tar and less of the harmful chemicals that traditional cigarettes have. We know that. So if you're an adult who has switched to vaping because you were a smoker, no judgment. The problem is we have something in the neighborhood of 2 million teens who never smoked who have taken up vaping. So they're not using this as a cessation tool. This is their introduction to nicotine addiction 101. And the companies that are selling these products are delighted with that because you saw that decline in tobacco products. Well, guess who's behind most of the major vape brands? Yes, our pals in the tobacco industry. As a cessation device, there are some questions. So if it's supposed to be a cessation device, then it would have to be a medical device, which would mean it would have to be manufactured to medical device standards, which would be expensive. It would have to demonstrate through research that it was successful in order to make those claims, and it would be regulated. There's really no need for them to market it as a cessation tool because it's so popular they don't need the additional market. In fact, England has struggled with cigarette smoking even more so than I think the US has per capita. And so their National Health Service was about to endorse a particular type of e-cigarette as a cessation product. The cigarette manufacturer, the e-cigarette manufacturer, backed out of the deal because they didn't want to have to comply with all the rules and regs, and they didn't need the market. This was going to be their nationally endorsed product, and the manufacturer walked away. So to get an idea of how much of a a marketing push and a marketing strategy this is. And this is what we talk about when we talk to teens, because I can tell them this is bad for you, and you know that they're going to run right home and stop doing it right away. But if I tell them you're being used by the marketing firms, you're being used by the manufacturers, that tends to hit home more. Nobody likes to feel that they're being used or being manipulated. It's a fad in many ways, a very social activity. It's very, all the kids are doing it. That's what you'll hear. Granted, we know that only, at worst case, 25% of them are doing it, but it's like Tide Pods. 1 or 2 YouTube videos can make it seem like every third kid is having Tide Pods for dessert, and that we know that's not true. But it is very popular and very visible on YouTube. My daughter goes to Pinkerton. They've closed the bathrooms on 2 floors in the Freshman Academy building because they have so many kids there vaping. And now there's a monitor at the restrooms on the 1st floor, which is the only one the kids are allowed to use. Schools are doing things like, well, Pinkerton's doing a 10-day suspension. They're treating it as drug paraphernalia. They have an out-of-school program where you can reduce your suspension to 5 days. It has a waiting list because they've had so many kids coming off of sports teams. I mean, it's that prevalent. And Pinkerton is not exclusive. It's just one of the larger schools, so maybe their problem seems a little bit more extreme. But I'm sure the school system here has had the same challenges. Sanborn has had me to talk to their middle schoolers and their high school students, because we are seeing this in middle schools. It's a lot like finger spinners, those fidgets, but when this fad fades, the nicotine addiction will remain, and that's the problem. In addition to detention and sort of punitive actions for breaking the rules, we are going to be dealing with teenage kids, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds with nicotine addiction. So once taking their vapes away from them is not going to solve the problem. So what do we know about nicotine? Highly addictive. It's derived from tobacco plants. It has psychoactive effects, so it can be a stimulant or can be a relaxant. Drug reinforcing behavior. It feels good as a stimulant. It stimulates the release of dopamine. So it does feel good, and that can reinforce its use, compulsive use, the urge to smoke at certain times of the day. If you were a smoker, you know, again, certain settings you feel like doing it more. It's easy to relapse after abstinence, and many smokers will tell you that they'll be in certain, they could have not had a cigarette for 20 years, but they're sitting in a bar with their friends and they would kill for a cigarette. Same kind of social ties and social practices. And then physical dependence, because it is an addictive drug. I won't go through all these systems, but we think of smoking and vaping as dangerous in particular for the lungs, but nicotine affects a whole lot of different organ systems in the body. And again, we're talking about developing bodies. They're still at that evolving stage. This is particularly true when we're talking about brain development. And as with other substances, one of the dangers of introducing an addictive behavior or substance during adolescence is that it can prime them for addictive behaviors later in life, because it affects their reward system, their stimulation system, their response to urges. I always forget the word that I want there. So it's going to affect their controls, their behavioral control systems. This is an example of an e-juice display. I took a picture of this on a field trip to a vape shop. I have a very interesting job. What'd you do today, Mom? I went to a vape shop, honey. Why do you ask? And they're lovely. They're like living rooms, big couch sectional units, big screen TVs, often a bar set up where you can try different juices, different devices. As you can see, as a cessation device, the idea would be you would start at a high concentration, 24 milligrams per milliliter of nicotine, and slowly reduce to 0 milligrams of nicotine. The flavors that we can't really see too well in this picture, but are things like cinnamon coffee cake, strawberry cheesecake, cotton candy, bubble gum, unicorn tears, everything you could possibly imagine. Sicky, sweet, again, candy-like flavors. exactly what the Marlboro man wants when he climbs off his Harley. Man, I could go for a strawberry margarita smoke right now. You know, clearly we are targeting these toward kids. And these flavors are troubling even aside from the nicotine, because while they are food-safe ingredients, food-safe sweeteners, those ingredients are meant to be ingested. That means digested through the stomach. Instead, they're being inhaled. Now, I know that you can safely drink Hershey's chocolate syrup. I have tested this theory in the interest of science myself. I can verify. But if I turn it into a mist and try to inhale it, it's a very different system we're talking about, much more sensitive tissue in the lungs. And in fact, one of the flavors that we know to cause problems is diacetyl. It's a buttery flavoring. It was sprayed on, and may still be sprayed on, microwave popcorn kernels before they're packaged. The workers that were spraying it weren't wearing masks or anything. They would inhale some of this aerosolized flavoring, and they would develop what was called bronchiolitis obliterans, which commonly known as popcorn lung, where it would literally gunk up the lung tissue. That's a technical term. I don't want you to be frightened by that, but it would reduce the airflow and the elasticity of lungs and their ability to process oxygen. Diacetyl is a flavoring that has been used in many of the e-juices, buttered rum, French toast, any of those that have that sort of buttery flavoring. And this is one we know, when inhaled, causes lung disease. We have no idea what all the other flavorings are going to do. We haven't had that kind of exposure. We will know because we have an entire generation of lab rats who are exposing their lungs on a daily basis to flavorings which may be safe when eaten, but we have no idea what they're going to do when they're inhaled. So there's a lot of pictures coming up next, because these things come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. And what is it you're looking for? Would you even recognize what you had? If you saw this on someone's desk, would you think that was an e-cigarette of some kind? Looks like a pen, right? So does this one. This one looks at least a little bit like a traditional cigarette. These are sort of your early disposable, relatively cheap products. This one I had samples of until a teacher at a school system I won't mention, Sanborn Middle School, decided she'd see, does it twist open? No, it doesn't. But anyway, my budget is very low. So these are not refillable, not rechargeable. They would be, say, this little paper tab. You pull the tab off, you press the button. It has a battery inside. It's good for about 600 puffs. And they're at about 6 to 12 milligrams per milliliter concentration. So fairly weak nicotine solution. This one is crazy apple. There's also, as I said, strawberry margarita and wild mango and clearly fun flavors. When we start talking about these devices, they're a little more complex. These are not disposable. You would fill these with your own choice of juices. They have batteries that can be recharged. This is called a vape mod. These are the ones that tend to blow up because they have a battery that can be modified. They have a heating element that can be modified to get a higher temperature. But again, there's no consumer product safety standards for these products. Teddy bears have 14, 18 consumer product safety standards. These do not. And of course, for your hipsters, a pipe version, because you really need something to go with the beard. Now, if you're on Pinterest, this is an interesting little stroll. Put up vape on Pinterest and you'll get everything from the superhero Marvel comic series to Iron Man, to your sort of bling and beach series, to everything from Hello Kitty to whatever. A lot of steampunk stuff out there. Here's the basic technology. You're working with a mouthpiece of some kind, a reservoir for the liquid, a heating element, and a battery. This actually has a USB charging port on the end of it. And this is a very basic style of vape pen. You would fill the reservoir with your flavored liquid, screw it together, turn it on, and vape. These are vape mods, as I mentioned. Of course, we're still selling the Athena line for ladies because we're still using a lot of those same marketing strategies. Here's some of the consequences of what happens when you have a device that has high temperature heating and liquids and no regulations to control it. Here are the simpler technology ones. That's how the ones that I showed you before. This one here is sold. They hang on a little thing next to the Slim Jims in the Shell station. They're about $7.99. So easily within the price point of a kid, they can talk themselves past the 19-year-old working behind the counter. This one makes school nurse heads explode. It's a vape device that's designed to look like an asthma inhaler. So you could carry that around without anybody thinking twice about it. This is the Cadillac. This is the one that has changed the game. So this is Juul, and you may have heard kids refer to Juuling. Juul is so popular that it has become the name of vaping. They're Juuling. This is the device. These are the mouthpiece and flavor pod. This is the charger. It plugs right into your computer, your USB port. It's a little magnetic port, looks like an antenna. It's about the size of a large thumb drive, about this long, very slender. You can buy skins for it to make it decorative. The flavors come in Virginia tobacco, creme brulee, mango, cool mint, fruit medley. And this is not even advertised as a cessation product. This is meant as a replacement product for people who are smokers. It is meant as a replacement device. So unlike most devices, this has a particularly high concentration of nicotine because they want it to be satisfying to someone with a long-term smoking habit. So these run about 50 milligrams per milliliter of nicotine. Now kids are starting with these because they're so easy to disguise and they are the coolest of cool. They're supposed to be the iPhone of e-cigarettes. And the FDA is now leaning on Juul as a company, trying to determine how to curb the access of these products. These are bought online, so of course all you have to do is click the button that says, are you over 18? Yes, I am. Do you have an Amazon gift card? Yes, I do. Okay, I can purchase these on Amazon. I've got gift cards that I bought at CVS. I can use those to buy this stuff online, have it shipped to my house, sell a few to my friends, and cover my expenses. There are, of course, counterfeit Juul pods that you can also buy because it's kind of like the Keurig of e-cigarettes. And they occasionally offer special flavors, like holiday flavors. This is Juno, very similar. Again, kids keep them in their sleeve, they keep them in their pocket, they keep them in their backpack. In the middle of class, all they have to do is suck in and it activates it. It's not like cigarettes where you've got to light something, you've got to strike a match, it creates a huge cloud of smoke, and then you have to dispose of it somehow. This you can use as needed, a puff here, a puff there, a puff here, a puff there. And in fact, as a cessation device, because you're no longer waiting to go out into the smoking area as an employee and have your 15-minute smoke break out in the snow in New Hampshire in the middle of January, you can quickly take a puff in the stairwell or in the restroom without anyone really knowing. People tend to be smoking more, not less. So that's the adults. This is a new horror that recently came up. This is vapeware. And these are backpacks and sweatshirts that have a port built directly into the strings of the sweatshirt. You can see this is the mouthpiece. This is a nice rubber edge. It fits right over any shape or type of vape device. And that way, all you have to do is grab the string of your hoodie and puff into it. Of course, they also have the little black dress that has a hood with a string for those of us who need to be really fashionable. You can read the small print, but I'll help you. It says, make it discreet because what you vape and when you choose to do so is nobody's business. Make it hands-free because you've already got your hands full with phones and keys. It doesn't say school books, but love those. Can you vape marijuana? Yes, you can vape marijuana, as a matter of fact. There are devices that you can heat up dry leaf material just enough to make it release its chemicals but not burn. You can also use it as a concentrate. So when you take marijuana leaf and you force butane or alcohol through it, you can extract a resin, whereas traditional marijuana has about a 10% THC. These little babies here, wax or shatter or butter, those have somewhere in the 60 to 80% THC concentration. And so you just need a special device that you can heat it up with, and it releases its vapor, very strong, plus some of the pesticides and the residual butane, so you get that extra little kick. These might be the marijuana devices that you may have seen. I'm not going to say you're familiar with. I'm not looking at anyone particular when I say that. These are marijuana devices you may have seen in the movies. There, that was good. Old school glass pipes, bongs, water pipes for smoking dried material. This is the new century. So these can be used, some of these can be used for either liquids or dried material. Some of them can be used, this is actually a water pipe device, so an electronic bong. I love this one here. This is again a water pipe. It comes with its own leather case. Again, your hipster version. These are more pricey. These are more in the, can be $99, $100, $150 range. So we're taking it up a notch, but just so that you have an idea of, what these things look like. These are all pens that can be used with those wax concentrates that I had the little pots of in the last picture. So again, would you necessarily know that if you saw this kind of device in someone's desk, in someone's drawer, that was a electronic delivery device of nicotine and or other stuff? So just for show and tell. So what we don't know, when you heat up e-juice, the chemicals change. So some of them do change into things like formaldehyde, one of the ingredients in traditional cigarettes that we worry about. And the other chemicals that they morph into when they're heated can cause inflammation. And we know that if you repeatedly expose tissue to inflammation, you can develop illnesses like cancer, like COPD, like chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases. We can't really test these products because there's no standard product. It's not like there's a Coke and a Pepsi and we can check this national product. In fact, on my field trip, when I asked the fellow, where do you get your liquids from, this beautiful display of all these flavors? He said, well, a lot of people order them from China, but I don't trust that at all. I make these myself. This is my own line of products. I order the nicotine solution online and the flavorings. These are all my own recipes. Really? What's your background? Well, I used to be the copy center manager at Staples, and before that, I worked at the audio shop in Best Buy, which are great jobs, don't get me wrong. But that is not the pharmacological background that I am looking for when I'm going to be sucking something into my lungs that you have whipped up in the back of your store in what I'm certain are lab-like conditions. Plus, we can only test these devices on mice and tissue. We can't test them on people. So again, we don't know what the long-term effect is going to be, aside from the nicotine, which we do know. Takeaway points, is this more dangerous for teens than it is for adults? Absolutely. It's a social activity with an addictive chemical. So once the fad is over, the addiction will be there. We know that their brains are subject and susceptible to addictive behaviors and priming them for dangers later on, and we don't know what those ingredients' long-term effects are going to be. We also know that 8th graders who use e-cigarettes are 10 times more likely to eventually smoke tobacco cigarettes. So that nice curve that we had is going to go back up because they can't always get their vape supplies, but they can always find cigarettes. And we know that kids who smoke cigarettes are more likely to smoke marijuana. We know this traditionally. So I think we can extrapolate that kids who use e-cigarettes are going to be more likely to try marijuana as well. There are some great resources out there, though. Science News for Students has a great sort of piece for kids to investigate on their own. Some of the issues around vaping, the safety issues. BU put out this great video. It's more appropriate for high school and college kids because occasionally they use words like bullshit, which of course makes it way more valid. You know they're going to believe it because there were bad words in it, but not really appropriate for middle school kids. And then stillblowingsmoke.org. Great peer-generated kind of conversations, peer-to-peer conversations. I would also, any kind of peer group stuff that you can do around e-cigarettes tend to be constructive. Dover Youth to Youth has got some great stuff going on. nnepc.org. We have some good things on our website, a great sort of fact sheet on e-cigarettes. We have a middle school, high school curriculum that was developed according to educational standards here in New Hampshire, which includes, of course, a Jeopardy game, because you should have a Jeopardy game to keep things going. And Catch My Breath, which if you talk to Breathe New Hampshire, this is a program that they're promoting. They've actually got a teacher they've purchased the licensing for, using it here in New Hampshire.
In Raymond, actually.
Raymond, yes, thank you. There's an 8th grade teacher that was working with this program, I think, and they're pushing her as a resource. So yes, excellent program. And again, my preference, my specialty is talking to adults. I can't talk to my own 14 or 19-year-olds, so I don't even attempt to talk to yours. So if you can find materials that are good with them, please go for them, because I think that'll be more effective. The New Hampshire's Department of Health and Human Services Tobacco Prevention and Cessation Program, and of course, me at the Poison Center, which you can reach through 222-1222. Hopefully you put that number in your phones. You can text the word poison to 85511. You can go on our website and chat. We're up right on the cutting edge, I can tell you. We are right there. And you can always reach me, because I live in Hampstead, travel from Salem to Colebrook, doing exactly this kind of thing. So if I can help you, ta-da. Stop the clock.
Excellent.
Yes, that
Thank
coffee
you very
really helped.
much. That was super informative.
That was a speed speaking, right? No more coffee?
That's what we're used to doing. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is changed from the agenda. It's actually Kate Frey from New Futures. We've been working with New Futures for so many years, I can't remember. Since 2002 when we started, we've had our partnership with you. And we've done a lot of work on marijuana prevention and awareness with them. And I'm very excited that Kate's joining us tonight. So thank you.
And I want to thank Raymond Coalition for Youth. They've always been such strong partners. We've been here a few times talking about this topic, so we're happy to do that again. I'd also like to introduce Katie Foster here, who is our Community Engagement Coordinator. If you want to become involved with New Futures in any capacity, whether it's through the substance use disorder policy work we do, or health access, or early childhood, please connect with Katie. We have a lot of great information. There are packets here, and I also have some other handouts, the slides I'm going to go over today, as well as a really good article about how to talk to your teens about marijuana. I agree. I can't talk to my own teens about it, so I'm not a great source. But so just to lay out the policy landscape in New Hampshire quickly, and it's similar to what's really happening nationally. And you hear more and more, there's a tremendous amount of confusion around marijuana policy. These different shades of marijuana policy is really what you hear the most about. And there's often confusion of what it really means to have legalized marijuana and medical marijuana, decrim. So, the medicalization of marijuana, the use for medical purposes has become law in about 29 U.S. states. Some states have just CBD products as opposed to the whole plant for marijuana. But 29 states do have some form of medicalization of marijuana. Unlike any other FDA-approved drug, it's not prescribed typically by your provider. What it is that it's recommended. In New Hampshire, the way it works is that you have to be have a certified condition by law. I'll get into that a little bit more. Decriminalization, it's often confused with legalization. However, it still means that if you are caught in possession of a small amount of the drug for personal use, you don't get a criminal penalty. It's like getting a traffic ticket. It might be $100, a very low fine. It's still illegal to use. As I said, the penalty is usually on the smaller side, unless you keep doing it, I suppose. And now 22 states have passed decriminalizing the possession and use of marijuana. So legalization is really what we talk about full on, every aspect of the marijuana business would become legal. You heard of terms, legalization typically without commercialization. It might be made legal for recreational use, but again, small amounts. doesn't always allow production, distribution, and sale. So laws typically allow for the small amounts, usually about 6 plants. Washington, D.C. and Vermont are Vermont is an example of this. However, there's still loopholes that creates an industry because, interestingly enough, there are these gifting loopholes that, yes, you can't sell the marijuana, but you can gift it to somebody. So if you buy a very expensive T-shirt, you just so happen to get a pound of marijuana with it. And so if you go to the Marijuana Policy Project, there's all these things about how to get around, states that don't have, commercialization. You can still make a buck with gifting it. And then there's legalization with commercialization. 7 states who have legalized have this model, and this is what we're concerned about. Somebody switched around the slides. I'll go back to what this means. But this really means that as I said, all components of the marijuana business is legal. It creates a commercial enterprise that has free reign to brand and advertise products, pot oils, pot candy, and baked goods, and allows an industry that thrives on heavy users and marketing to new users. So very much with what Laurie said, like any other addictive product and an industry behind it, their goal is to sell more of that product. They do so by targeting heavy users or luring in new users. So just like what you saw with cigarettes, I'll show in a minute that that's very much what marijuana industry targets as well too. Just go back. So what we have in New Hampshire, and it's really important that we are often clarifying what it means. I know Celeste and I were on a show about this as well too. We do have a medical marijuana. It's known as the Therapeutic Cannabis Program. It was in 2013. When it was created, it was highly regulated. It was really only allowed 4 dispensaries throughout the state. It only allowed about 5 or 6 qualifying conditions, meaning if you had that condition and your doctor certified it, you could get a medical marijuana card or therapeutic cannabis card and go to one of the ATCs. That has really changed over the years. It's getting less and less regulated in the sense that now we have over 20 conditions that are certified. There was discussion at the legislature about adding 2 more dispensaries. I'll show you a little bit about even the therapeutic cannabis. This is supposed to be a drug, how that's actually very targeted towards youth too. New Hampshire has decriminalized marijuana. We were one of the last states in New England to do so. The law passed back in 2017. A small amount, 3/4 of an ounce, is no longer criminal. It's a civil offense. But what we don't have, and we hope not to have, is the legalization of marijuana. You will hear often the states around us have legalized. Why don't we just move in that direction? I know I overuse this, but I've been at the State House for 20 years. I've never heard before that we should do something because Massachusetts is doing it, but all of a sudden we're hearing that over and over again. Where we are at the landscape in New England, it's pretty early on. The states that have legalized with the commercial market have yet to roll out their retail sales. That'll be happening this summer, most likely in Mass and Maine, soon to follow. So what this means. So access, we always put this slide up about is it in the public interest to have more marijuana use or less marijuana use? Anytime we're out in the community, we raise this question. Is that what we want for our communities? What does that mean for our communities? What will our communities look like? What will they smell like? What will our youth be dealing with? So why we care in New Hampshire is we already have a significant substance use issue among 12 to 17-year-olds and 18 to 25 years old. So just kind of what Laurie showed before too, we're in the blue. So not only do we surpass other New England or other U.S. states, but also we're the highest in New England. We're usually the top 5 as far as the highest use in binge drinking, current marijuana use of non-medical pain relievers, alcohol abuse in the past year. So we already have really significant rates of substance misuse among youth. I'm sure all of you can attest to that. And also what was brought up earlier as well too is with marijuana, why it's such a concern right now is the whole perception of risk, the whole perception of harm. So the more you talk about it, and the more it becomes normalized, and the more it becomes part of a movie scene. And this year the Oscars, every other joke was about marijuana. It's the interpretation is that it's less harmful. Anytime a drug is used is less harmful, you have the inverse reaction to the use. So when something is viewed as less harmful, use goes up, and that's exactly what's happening with marijuana. Not only in New Hampshire but everywhere in the United States, because more and more it's being normalized, and I think Laurie did a great job showing that as well too.
Plus, we talk about it as medicine now.
Yes, right. It's a medicine. Yes, it must be.
Right.
It must be good for you.
There must be something good
right.
about it.
Cures
Right.
cancer. We hear a lot of confusion around that. So this slide is scary to us because this is really about the perception of harm from marijuana. The questions posed is, do New Hampshire youth, young adults think marijuana is harmful? So we have the lowest perception of harm, and that's not a good thing. Means our youth view it less harmful than any other youth in any other state, even states that have legalized. So we are walking into this situation already behind the game, because this is what we're dealing with the perception of harm. I like to show this too, and a little bit what Laurie touched on too, is that prevention does work. Absolutely, it does work. We're really seeing a lot of headway, especially with cigarettes in other areas. But then things like Celeste said earlier, other things pop up. Alcohol use, and absolutely marijuana use, and vaping. So right where we think we can make some action on some of these, on some misuse, with marijuana, this shows you that we've really stayed significantly the same, if not maybe even increased, when every other product is decreasing the misuse. So this is important to talk about too, as far as the potency of the product. And we have heard a lot and seen a lot of the movies from the 60s and 70s, and people smoking a joint, and when it was popular in the 60s and 70s to do. When we're talking about the product itself, there are two significant products, or two significant components of marijuana. One is CBD, which is more the medical side of it, that has been approved in limited cases with the FDA to be used for medical purposes. But THC is really the psychoactive ingredient. That's also the addictive ingredient. And so when we talked about marijuana in 1965, that was maybe 3% THC. The amount of THC in products now can be as high as 99%. And most of the time, it's through these edible products. In states that have legalized, in Colorado, really under 50% of the market is really the green leaf smokable kind. It's really a whole new generation of products that look a lot like this. Look like a Kit Kat bar, look like lollipops, look like fruit chews and ice cream. And these are all marketed towards, as we probably can figure out, towards kids, because you're luring in a new market. Any state that has legalized is still, and commercialized, has really struggled with this issue. Colorado, it was the Wild West, and literally, and so really, and they had no standard at all, and didn't really have any restrictions on marketing. They pulled that back a little bit. Other states, though, they still, even though they may have more regulation, it's very hard to work with the industry lobbyists to say, okay, if you want to have edible products, have it in brown paper. It's not working. This is what these products are looking like. It's also a concern for poisoning, and I've been wanting to ask Laurie this question, and I will after this, is, states that have legalized saw a huge spike in poisonings in emergency room department visits from these edible products. They look like candy. Kids get into them. They're not locked up. There's all these things that can happen from that. We are not there yet. However, when we talk about, this is interesting, is, we don't have legalized marijuana, but we do have a therapeutic cannabis program that right now, under rules, even though they have restrictions on advertising, they have Facebook pages, they have Instagrams that anybody can go onto, any kid can go onto. We're actually challenging that with the Department of Health and Human Services and making them make those changes in their rules the next time around. But these are really ads from Sanctuary ATC, Banana Bread brand, Gorilla Bomb, edibles, peanut butter cups, mints, and you can tell with these products, THC, 23, 21%, pretty high, pretty significant rates of THC. This doesn't even show the worst of it. It's like, okay, 2-for-1 candies, and this is all that's advertised on the open Facebook page for what's supposed to be used as a medical product for very, very sick people. This is another picture on Instagram. These are fruit chews. They have watermelon fruit chews or green apple fruit chews this month. So I show this for a couple purposes. If there are edibles out there right now, there are things like waxes and dabs that are being allowed to be used in New Hampshire for their therapeutic cannabis program. Many people may want that product, but to advertise it so openly through social media, we all know the reason behind that is to really, make that product intriguing and enticing to kids. So, showed you this one. So, it is something we need to be concerned about. Even the presentation title, I struggle a little bit with the term gateway. There's been different discussions about it, but I can tell you this, what absolutely is a gateway, that maybe it's not, one drug over another drug. But what is the gateway is the age of use. Is the earlier you start using a product, whether it's cigarettes, whether it's nicotine, whether it's alcohol, whether it's marijuana, the younger you use, 9 times out of 10, you're likely to have a substance misuse issue later in life. And so when the conversation is about what's less harmful, we hear a lot, well, marijuana is a lot less harmful than opiates, a lot less harmful from alcohol. It is still a harmful, addictive product. And the more it's normalized, the more we will continue to see the use go up. So we worked actively on a campaign, and we will keep working on a campaign to oppose marijuana legalization in the state. Katie, if you're interested in participating, go see Katie. She can sign you up for any different type of role or any kind of involvement with New Futures. So that's really it on that side of things.
That's it. That's a lot. That's very good. I'm curious to follow up your question for Laurie. Do you track the calls to poison control?
Absolutely. The Poison Center does track calls regarding marijuana, both at the national level, the American Association of Poison Centers. We also track it at the Northern Midland Poison Center. It's a little bit challenging for me to talk about marijuana because, of course, since we represent Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, Maine and Vermont have both legalized recreational marijuana. The good news is that as a toxin, marijuana is not that toxic. That is, even when kids get into it, little children get into the edibles, they are not likely to die. They may have a very unpleasant experience, but they're not likely to die because it is not inherently that toxic. On the other hand, when we talk about the edibles in particular, the dosing can be a problem. So, for example, a brownie may say, the instructions on a brownie, all of the edibles have to be segmented into doses. So if you've got a pack of 10 gummy bears, each one can only have up to 5 milligrams of THC. Or if you've got a chocolate bar, it has to be segmented into 10 pieces so that you can break off a piece, and it will recommend you say you eat perhaps a quarter of this brownie and then wait 45 minutes to see if it takes effect, because it takes longer for it to get into your bloodstream when you're ingesting it, that is digesting it, than something you're smoking that goes right into your bloodstream. Now, I don't know about you, but I find eating a quarter of a brownie and waiting 45 minutes quite challenging. That's just me, and I'm a grown-up who should have some restraint. Certainly if you're a kid and you see a cookie that looks like a cookie and is not wrapped like medicine or stored like medicine, it's a lot more tempting to eat the entire cookie. And we've seen adults who ate a quarter of the brownie, waited 10 minutes, didn't see any effect, ate the rest of the brownie, and then because they were new users or naive users, they had a rather unpleasant experience. That's fine. So that's one of the problems that we see. Again, not lethal. The rules for packaging, because if you're taking it as medicine, clearly smoking something for medicinal purposes is really not the best way of taking it, because smoking something has its downside. So the the edibles are very popular. New Hampshire's requirements say they have to be in opaque packaging, they have to be labeled with all of the medical sort of information that she showed on her slide, and they have to have child-resistant packaging. That, at most 4-year-olds can get through my safety deposit box, let alone resistant packaging. So there's an attempt to not make it quite as appealing looking as, a display of candies. But you go online and search edibles, and you'll find these beautiful gourmet chocolate sites, and they'll have codes to tell you which ones are nut-free, which ones are vegan, which ones are gluten-free, which ones are sustainably raised. I mean, all of the things that we look for in specialty foods. And there is still a trend to do things like goldfish crackers and Pop-Tarts and Kit Kats and, yes, a lot of cutesy names that make it sound like it should be fun. But for the most part, we're seeing that sort of shift a little bit as the government imposes controls on it now. It's the danger of this becoming big tobacco and becoming such a huge financial endeavor on the part of the state of New Hampshire, because as we've seen in other states that have done, Colorado calls it retail marijuana. They don't even call it recreational. They call it retail. Oh dear God, no. Because it has been such a huge windfall for tax income. And this is New Hampshire. We are always looking for sources of revenue. If there's an opportunity to put a sin tax on it, that's very tempting for our legislature.
However, the states that have legalized and have this increase in revenue, there's also increased costs that come with legalizing the product. Especially when we see drug driving and no test yet for that. Healthcare issues that we talked about.
Treatment programs.
Even treatment programs.
Right.
We're seeing skyrocketing rates of, inpatient for marijuana. There's a revenue, that could come in, but there's also an increased cost. And remember, this is a state with an alcohol fund since 2003 that was only fully funded 1 year. And so the idea that money will go for prevention, treatment, and recovery hasn't happened with the alcohol fund. And in many of these states that have legalized, it's often shifted into other parts of the budget. And so I caution as far as it's a huge windfall.
And we're already looking at a dearth of capacity to treat our opioid addiction, our epidemic that we've been having. So we're 48th in the country as far as capacity for treatment programs. Adding another substance to that mix. And we also talk about, it's not a gateway drug, but people who have moved on to other drugs will, while not everyone who smokes marijuana moves on to other drugs, people who have moved on to other drugs will likely tell you that they did smoke marijuana. And while it's an illegal substance, you're entering a marketplace. If your kid knows where they can get marijuana, they'll know where they can get other substances as well. I go into Target and can't come out without 12 throw pillows. It's that kind of opportunity, I think, So there's certainly downsides to the whole idea of legalizing it. So.
And again, it speaks to that increased access, increased use.
Yeah.
I had asked you, we work with a few veterinarian clinics, and they are getting increased calls for pet poisonings.
Oh, yeah.
So while people may not think about their young people or the young people in the community, there are a lot of people who are very connected to their pets and making sure they understand that that's left alone. I know if you put something on the counter, some dogs will jump up on the counter and get it if it's something that's tasty for them. And they're seeing that a lot with the pets and marijuana products in our community where it's not even legalized yet. So.
Well, especially when you're talking about older adults, because first of all, older adults are more likely to have many of the conditions for which medical marijuana is appropriate. They're also likely to not have a big stigma about it depending on their age, because in their youth it was a fairly popular substance, and so there's no real stigma against smoking marijuana. Plus, they're likely retired, so they don't have to worry about drug testing in the workplace either. So we have seen an uptick in older adults in marijuana, and because they don't have children in the home on a regular basis, they are not storing these medicines up high and away. They're storing them where the dog can get a hold of them. So it's those kinds of social issues that we really didn't anticipate, but who knew, you know.
We could go on and on talking about this because it's a very vast subject with lots of things that people don't necessarily think of or understand. Our young people who are involved in the coalition are very passionate about this. They have a loud voice. They've shared it with New Futures. They've written. They've done videos. This is something that they're concerned about because of the high THC. We had a meeting today and we were talking, and we said that we thought it was 96 to 98%, and so we're pretty close to it. But they know of products that are here in this community that have those high THC levels, and so they're concerned about it. We know the vaping is an issue here in the school, in the community. It's easy to hide. Laurie mentioned that you ingest it. There's no smoke that comes out when you vape. I mean, they can ingest it and not even have a way for anybody. The teachers, the kids are talking about, it's happening in the classrooms. It's happening on the buses. I mean, this is a very discreet product that can cause a lot of harm and addiction for a very long time.
And I mean, it smells, the fruity smells, etc. The teacher have their back turned and they'll take a quick puff on their vape and it just dissipates. And it smells like half of the colognes my daughter brings home from Victoria's Secret. You know, it's fruit salad. It's just there's not the telltale signs of cigarette smoking that used to at least be a clue to parents.
Right.
So
thank you both very much for the amazing information, very helpful information, and for joining us this evening. Glad to have you here.
I have cards, we have cards, so if you have something else that you have questions about, we'll hang out for a few minutes, and otherwise you can just run out that door.
We're not done yet. We're not done yet
I'm
because
saying in front of fans.
as with anything the coalition does, when we provide information on what to be aware of, we also want to make sure we provide information on resources to deal with these things. And we're very fortunate here in Raymond to have two amazing young ladies who are working with the young people here in the school district. Miss Angela Fallon is a social worker here at the high school, and Miss Gina Simone, right, is at the high school and the middle school as a student assistance person. I'm going to let the both of them tell about the services they offer and how you can utilize them, contact them if you're a student or an adult, how you can get in touch with them. So, go ahead.
Again, I'm Gina Simone. So I work at the high school 3 days a week and the middle school twice a week. I do individual counseling with the students as well as group counseling. And I try to bring initiatives and new activities into the school to educate staff, to educate the students about drug and alcohol use. My program as student assistance counselor, also it's more about healthy living and healthy choices. So it's not necessarily just drug and alcohol. I mean, anything can be prevention for drug and alcohol. So it's really trying to incorporate healthy lifestyle choices and educating children on that.
So again, my name is Angela Fallon. I've been here since January of 2014. I'm only here part-time. I'm here 2 days a week just at the high school on Mondays and Wednesdays. Most people get in contact with me through email or teacher referral or through their guidance counselor. I've had some parent referrals, but that's not often the case. I have lots of students refer themselves as well. I do mostly individual and group work with students. I also work with families too, so I work with parents. I specifically work with the Raymond Alternative Program, the REAP program. So I'm connected with all of those students and their families as well. And yeah, I guess that's all I would say.
So we had a great conversation today with some students in the building, and we were talking about both of these ladies, and we just want to make sure that people are aware of the services that they offer and how to contact them. That any referral made to them is confidential. So in the past, I've had people call our office, the Raymond Coalition for Youth, saying they have a situation, they're concerned with their own child or they're concerned with their child's friend. Any situation like that, how do they access help? I will call one of the two of them, and my information will be relayed to them, or I will tell that person who called me to contact one of them. I'm done at that point. No information comes back to me that's in their hands, and they take care of the situation. They connect with the young person, and they try to move forward from there. But the point is that we've had people who can interact with the young people who are in need of services, and that's a very important thing that we want to make sure everybody knows about that, because we want to utilize you. Yes. we know there's a need here in the building. We know there's a need here in the community. So we have them. Let's use them. So would they call the school to get in touch with you?
Yep.
The high school?
Yeah, our numbers are on the district page
Okay.
as well, so you can find it there. Yeah, phone number, email.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the high school is 895-6616.
Yep.
Yes.
And I have extensions 2110.
110.
Honestly, the best way to find me is by email, because I'll be at both schools on any given day, so it's not specific.
And because I'm only here 2 days, email is the best way for me too, since I may not check my email every day.
And then, of course, you can contact our coalition office, which is 895-7061, and I can get you in touch with both of them as well. Another service, the coalition has a lot of information on our website, which is rcfy.org. We have access to prevention materials, treatment and recovery services, and we also have Karen Morton-Clark with us this evening. Karen is an amazing resource with Granite Pathways. The coalition is really about connecting the dots and bringing resources into the community, knowing where to go, who to go to, and how to get those services here in the community for people who need them to access them. Karen is with Granite Pathways and is here on Tuesdays at the Raymond Baptist Church all day long, and she's also can be reached through the New Hampshire Addiction Crisis Hotline, which is
1-844-711-HELP.
Thank you. We have those on our cards and on our website as well. That's available 24/7. We want everybody to know that they're not alone with these issues. There are many people in many communities struggling with substance misuse or addiction, and it's okay to ask for help, and there are people who care and want to help. So that's really the message that we want to drive home, that we care, we want to help you. If you need help, it's a safe place to ask for help. So, and with all of the information we've learned tonight, we know that there are young people and community at whole is struggling with these issues and is constantly getting new things thrown at them. So,
One other resource I would mention is the Partnership for Drug-Free NH website.
yes.
It has a lot of good information about how to talk to your kids at every age about different substances. And it also has some good peer-to-peer material. It has some other resources listed, and it also has information on the different community agencies that are doing this work at the grassroots level. I'm on the board, I have to say that.
Well, that's good. I knew that. So, does anybody have any quick questions? We have a couple minutes left. One quick question?
I always have questions. Big Tobacco suffered from lawsuits way back when. What can you say about lawsuits that may be coming with regard to marijuana? It just seems like it's primed for the same kind of situation we went through several years back.
So the advantage that I think tobacco, the disadvantage that tobacco had is that they were already a legitimate industry for many years selling a specific product and able to do research. There's only been 4 strains of marijuana that have been available for research purposes, and they are basically the ragweed of marijuana. They're absolutely horrible strains, very old strains available at the University of Maryland for research purposes because marijuana has been listed as a class 1 drug, a very dangerous addictive drug. So there hasn't been the opportunity to do research, therefore, to know what the true evils and dangers of it are, which is what the tobacco companies basically lost because of. They knew the dangers and they continued to sell their product. Marijuana doesn't have that that research body. Now we're doing there's lots of research being done now because there are all these different strains available, and we're still trying to figure out what its legitimate medical purposes might be versus what its claimed purposes might be. So it's hard to obviously anticipate what we'll find that marijuana use causes down the road, but it'll be hard to claim that the marijuana business industry as a whole knew about that beforehand. So they don't likely face that kind of threat.
Yeah, I think with any public health experiment, I mean, all of what we learned from cigarettes was really like 50, 60 years before it was very,
Right.
concrete. And so with marijuana, it's been legal in the state of Colorado for 5 years, which is really nothing compared to what we know from, how long it takes to really understand. And I totally agree because it is legal at the federal level, you know, there's a lot of issues with that, including the fact that it is not researched and we don't know a lot about it. I would argue a little bit that I do think there's an industry that is very clear that they know it's addictive. They have concerns about it themselves with their own family members. A couple people have been quoted to saying that. However, I think there's a difference with what we do already know about the clear research on tobacco.
Plus, we know that addiction has a variety of factors to it. So there are some chemicals, like nicotine, that will be addictive will cause addiction to almost anyone who uses that product. There are other substances like alcohol, for whom some people have the first sip of alcohol, hate it, never drink it again. Some people will have their first sip of alcohol and decide, okay, and they'll drink socially but never develop a dependence on it. Other people will develop a dependence on it, whether it's a genetic or an environmental influence, whatever that might be. So there are some concerns about the addictive qualities of marijuana as a substance. That, again, the jury is still up and down about that. There are some that are very strong influences that say it is an addictive substance, but we have seen from recreational use that there are those people that will use it recreationally, there are those people that will become addicted to it. So it's, you know, it's sort of a mixed bag.
So the overall ending thing to leave with is we need to give our young people and community members positive things to engage in, positive ways to reduce stress, positive ways to interact in the community without ever thinking that they need any of the substances that we talked about tonight. That's the overarching goal of all of the work that we do as a coalition. So thank you all for coming tonight and being a part of our evening.
Absolutely.
Very good. Thank you.
So have you seen